Hello, Michael Grasso with Private Pook Games, here today with a review of Odalin Dungeons of Doom, a dungeon crawler I've been looking forward to for quite a while. I definitely really like TANARES Adventures and have liked a lot of what Dragori Games has dreamed up, so I was very interested to see what they did with a somewhat more focused, maybe slightly darker narrative themed dungeon crawler. While I was playing through this game in its initial stages, I found myself with an interesting thought I want to start with, and that is so often when I'm reviewing and thinking about my thoughts of games, I really get analytical and I get into the intricacies of the game design and what I did and did not like philosophically about how the game design works. And I think that's good. That's part of our job as reviewers to look a little more deeply. But I think sometimes we forget that what is the person who is watching the review looking for? Was the game fun? That's a really simple statement. So I want to start here by saying, too long, didn't watch. I had a lot of fun with Odalin. I think it's a very fun game to play, and I'm going to do my best to tell you what things I liked about it. I'm going to have a couple comparisons to TANARES while also acknowledging these games do not play anywhere near as similarly as you might suspect. And really just trying to make you understand as best you can whether it's something you will like. All right, so this is the rule book. Why start with the rule book? Because I think the rule book perfectly illustrates the idea that Dragori Games was going for with this dungeon crawler, which is they are trying to really focus exactly what it's trying to be. This is a dark demon themed dungeon crawler. It is not a city builder, it is not a civilization political thing. It is you have characters, those characters junction with demons, and they go in dungeons and they beat up monsters. So the rule book here, you may notice, comes in at a clean 56 pages. That is about half the size of TANARES. I'm not saying that is a good or bad thing. It is arguable that TANARES needed a rule book the size it had. This one requires a rule book the size it has. But it is worth noting that those are the rules, and there is no learn to play book. Despite there being some errata in here that claims that you should look in the learn to play book, Dragori Games has been very clear that that was a mistake. They are updating it and sending an update pack for it. There is no learn to play. The rule book is the one place you go to. So this really is a focused experience. Now, what does that focused experience look like? Well, let's start with your hero. Here's an example of Iridia. This is one of the 4 characters I've tried. I've tried it in a game with 4 heroes. I've tried it in a game with 2 heroes. The only real differences are in the one with 2 heroes. Obviously, there's a little less synergy, but it also does end up being, I feel like it was the tiniest bit easier. It's not a huge imbalance, but I do feel like having 4 characters on the map does have a little bit of an advantage. 2 characters get to go twice around, so it doesn't really mathematically make sense that it would be easier, but it seems to feel that way. So Iridia is a Templar, has the class Holy Knight. I, in this instance, chose to junction Iridia with the demon Vine, Primarch of Savagery. So the way that works is I'll take these clear sleeves that are dark on one side and clear on the other, and each of them gets filled with one hero card. You'll notice that each hero card either has an action on the top or the bottom. Usually when it's on the top, it's an attack. Usually on the bottom, but not always, it's a instant or an ability. And then it junctions, just like the characters did, with a demon card. And this one slides over it, and basically it becomes one top and bottom ability card, which means every card you have for your hero has 2 different possible actions, a heroic action and a demonic action. And it would be nice and clean to say that the heroic action was always good and the demonic action was always bad. It is not always that simple, which is the way I personally like it. So it's nice to see that every single combination you could have gives you a lot of options. And you do have the ability every time you visit a campfire, which is essentially when you rest between a fight, you can junction to a new demon. So if I decide I don't want to use Vine, I can switch out Vine. I mean, who wouldn't want to? Look at how cool he looks. I mean, do I want to play this character? I don't want to play this character. Does kind of look like he's giving the finger, though. A little rude. But maybe I want to switch them out for Lilith, Witch of Sins. Well, now I have a new demon I can junction with and sometimes if I'm lucky enough turn into. And with that, I also have a whole nother set of Lilith cards that I can combine these with. So it might turn out that instead of having Sword of Zeal matched with Primarch's Force, it's actually going to be with Witch's Bolt, which is going to change the combination of actions I might be able to use. This gives a lot of interesting little things. You can even swap in between fights, in between combats, in between campfires, with the person you're playing with. If you're playing with a group of friends and it's like, hey, can I try your demon? Sure, try mine. Gives a lot of very cool ways to make this work. Now, there are also, just talking about the cards as well, there are also these little tokens that go in your stat slots. And the way it works is that each of your 6 stats, power, luck, agility, mind, spirit, and vigor, gives you some sort of bonus. Now, obviously, power gives you nothing at 0 when I have it this way. But then every time it goes up a point, it turns, and you may or may not gain a bonus. In this instance, at powers 1 and 2, Iridia, and I believe Iridia has 2 right now, gains 1 bonus damage every time they attack. In addition to that, I know that Iridia's regular luck was 0, but Iridia also got some gear cards that allowed her to get her luck up to 3. So now, that got it up to 1. So now every time there is a critical hit, you add 3 on. So it doesn't happen as often, but it's still pretty nice. Agility it lets you have more defense when you are blocking an attack. And while Iridia is not a very mind-focused or spirit person, Iridia chooses to punch monsters rather than debate them, I guess. Doesn't really get any bonuses, but if you do get bonuses, that actually allows you, if you look at it's a little hard to see these symbols, but it actually gives you, depending on how high your value gets, it allows you to actually choose to flip some of these cards to their other side, their highlighted side, where they have a more powerful effect. So that can be very cool. It's very satisfying to get a new gear card that allows you to put up a skill, and you right away not only get the bonus of the skill, but you are also allowed to, in a way, upgrade a card to a more powerful side. Now, another piece of this game that is really excellent is it is constantly giving you small incremental power-ups. Now, that can work a couple different ways. When you win a battle, there is usually a victory award. And that could be a certain number of equipment cards, a certain number of consumable cards, or a combination of both. So you get to draw from them in equipment cards. Just to give you an idea, these are some of the ones that Iridia has. For instance, Iridia got Count Viz's Bloody Blade. Pretty dark. This is, you can kind of see these are designed quite a bit like TANARES, but a little darker. And these include several things. They can include stat bonuses. They can include HP bonuses. They can include individual abilities, both passive and active. And then also, if you take a look, they might include dice you roll. Which brings me to the next piece, which is the way dice roll attacks work in this game, which I personally liked, but I could see possibly being not someone's favorite. Now, to begin with, I need to confess, I am not a huge fan of rolling a d20 to hit. I know my D&D fans will be horribly offended by that. Please forgive me. It's fine. I respect it. It's not that I think it's bad game design. I just find it a tad unsatisfying sometimes to roll a 20-sided die. It's a huge range of things, and it doesn't always feel meaningful thematically to me. I do, however, really enjoy dice that have iconography. I'm just a sucker for it. I'm not saying it's the right way to do it. I'm just saying I like it. So in this instance, having those different equipment cards giving you different dice to roll feels like an immediate power-up. You're getting to roll different dice. You're not rolling the same d20 and hoping for something good. Now, it also, at the end of the day, also ends up with the same issue that you can absolutely miss a roll, and it's frustrating, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But I also found that in this game, because you are also given, this is where these come in, 3 action tokens. These are not the actual action tokens, guys. These are empowerment tokens, but Dragori Games did not. It was another errata. They did not include action tokens with the game. They're sending that out in an update pack, so I'm using these in place of those. If you use one for an attack, you only can use one attack per turn, but that doesn't change the fact that you can still go and interact with an object. You can reposition yourself with movement. You can use a different sort of skill that may not be an attack, but might still cause damage or might support someone else. There's just so many things you can do that if you totally whiff on an attack, it doesn't really feel like that big of a loss in this game. Now the other piece, items and equipment do a lot of powering up. You also, every time you go to a campfire, you generally get to go up a level and get a new ability card. So in this instance, you can see this first one, Shield of Protection, that's a level 0 card. So the first time you are at a campfire, you can choose to get a new level 1 card from a couple different options. So what that entails is, you choose a card you want to switch it out for, you put in the new one, you both have a new effect on top that can be very powerful, and if you notice here, this card here slotted in a new benefit and or sometimes cost, depending on what it is, to use the bottom. In this instance, you get to gain 1 soul every time you use that, which is a good thing. It's not always going to be a good thing, but in this instance it is. That makes for a lot of different moments where your character gets to go stronger, become stronger, and use different things. So the game really focused on not having humongous level ups, more like having incremental, going from level 1 to level 1.1 to level 1.2 to level 1.3, having little moments where you get to always have new things to use and new ways in which for you to feel a tiny bit more powerful incrementally. And in that instance, it works very well dungeon crawler wise. And that's a little bit of a counterpoint to the city phase in TANARES, which was something I liked, but also at times felt a little bit tedious. It was complicated, a little bit frustrating. Playing it solo, I didn't mind too much. Playing it with a group, it tended to be a whole lot of talking and debates and a whole lot of analysis paralysis, which it's you know, give or take. It's not that one's better than the other. But like I said, the goal with Odalin seems to be that they wanted to focus everything, and this way of doing level ups does do that well. And it does it by giving you more ways in which you can power up, and yet at the same time, it feels more focused. It's odd, I know, to say that, but it really is true. So that's another piece to kind of bring this. I'm going to bring my camera over. Sorry if you get motion sickness. This is nothing spoilery in here. This is just a general, very early dungeon. I don't have any of the details in it. Nothing's set up where it's supposed to go. But I did want you to get an idea that the table space required for this game is not really that exceptionally huge. It's not nothing. It's a dungeon crawler. Dungeon crawlers take up space, but it really is not that big of a deal compared to many I know. I'm using 2 characters on this table, and I'm literally using a fold-up picnic table, and it's actually working okay. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention before I bounce off of this, or actually, last 2 things, I wanted to start by showing the campaign book, because this is another good counterpoint to a lot of campaign books in games. Now, I'm going to put my hand here for comparison. This should show you that this campaign book is fairly small. Once again, doesn't take up a whole lot of table space. I'm going to go ahead. Sorry, already. I'm going to move you out of the way. And obviously, I'm trying to keep everything centered in the camera, but I'm hoping it's at least kind of obvious you can see. You don't have to clear a ton of table space for it. You can see it has information on beginning your adventure. I'm not going to show anything that's spoilery other than the first chapter page, which shouldn't have anything awful. But you can see the journey phase of it starts much like TANARES. It gives you a chapter you read through. You can choose fast action mode if you don't want to spend a lot of time reading or making choose your own adventure choices, because I understand they get tiresome. And then it says, oh, read section 1, make your choice. Go to section 2 or 3. Go from there, and then eventually you get to your dungeon crawl. So I want to show this for 2 reasons. One, because I wanted to show that they have really condensed the space it takes up and the amount of books you have to look through. But also 2, because other than this journey phase or adventure phase, the game really stops playing anything like TANARES at that point. So to take us to our next piece, I'm going to flip forward a little bit. I'm going to show you the very first section where you will get into a battle. and it is the Snake's Den entrance. No real spoilers in here, guys. This is the first battle you're going to be in. It shows you where you start. It shows you your tiles. It shows you where the enemies go and has them numbered. There are numbered initiative cards that match up. These are not the ones for this fight, but just so you can see how they work. And then it's very clear with, here's the rules for this fight. Here is what you get if you win. Here is a door numbered 2, and that shows you when you are done with the fight and you open this door and proceed on, you know exactly which section to go to. And it's going to be somewhat linear, but you are going to have choices where you're going to have more than one door, and you don't necessarily have to go through all of them in order to progress the story. So I'm not going to say that this game has a whole lot of things in it that are going to... There's not going to be a whole lot of content you miss when you go through it. When you play through this whole game, you will experience most of its content. Playing it through a second time is going to mostly be different based on which hero you choose, which demon you choose, and which builds you choose. A lot of the rest of it, the dungeons, are really going to play mostly the same. It's not like TANARES in that way. It's not trying to give you 100 plus quests. It is giving you a focused journey with a lot of variety and permutations that keep things fairly interesting, depending on what you find interesting. Now, having said that, last piece I wanted to mention of this is the initiative system, which is admittedly a little basic. I did not find myself minding it, but it is worth showing so you understand there is also a little bit of randomness to this. There's a little bit of randomness to the dice. There's a little bit of randomness to the initiative. I would start by taking the initiative of my 2 heroes. Since it's 2 heroes and not 4, you add in Amulets of Power to give you additional turns, because you do need to have a total of 4 turns. The only rules with the Amulet of Power is if the first time it appears, I use it to give Celine a turn. The second time it appears, it must be Iridia, which allows... you can't have a player who's playing Celine just bully the player playing Iridia and saying, well, I get all the turns. No, you absolutely must distribute them evenly. And then in this instance, let's say I was going to be squaring off against 2 Viper Sorcerers and 2 Dire Snakes. Well, first I'd get the minis. The minis are fairly easy to find because there are pictures of them on here, and even their bases are colored to match them. You don't have to take off and remove them like you have in previous games, and you simply just shuffle this all together. You shuffle it as best you can, and you lay them out. Oh, that was a pretty good layout for me, actually. And you go left to right. So there's a lot of randomness to how the turn order goes, but it is known information. You know exactly who's going and when. So I like to think of this as being a little bit like Aeon's End, in that you literally just take initiative cards and shuffle them, but the difference is in Aeon's End, you only know who's going one turn at a time. In this one, you have the whole picture. You know when folks are going. You can make decisions on where you position yourself and who you're going to be by based on that. So that's super important. Now, the last piece I wanted to mention, because I can't remember if I mentioned it. If I already did, I apologize for saying it again. But I think it is super important to talk about soul and corruption, because this is another key dynamic of how your character works. So you can earn soul for, in some instances, beating monsters. Sometimes it'll be bonuses with certain cards you play. You can also sometimes have to take corruption. You absolutely must take at least 1 corruption at the beginning of every round, but there are also some attacks. In particular, the Holy Knight has some attacks that force them to take corruption, either for the attack or on behalf of their peers. And so there is a constant threat of managing your corruption. Every once in a while, you need to find an ability that brings it down. You also have a general basic action that allows you to sacrifice 3 HP to bring it down 2. And despite the fact that at times this game, in its early stages at least, in its early stages it can feel a little bit on the easy side. It does get more difficult as it goes on, thankfully. But even at its easiest moments, corruption is a constant threat. And you have to be aware and make decisions about how high you are willing to let it get. Because if you are going to manage it, you are going to have to spend at least 1, if not more, of your 3 actions trying to manage it. You may have to sacrifice HP. You might have to sacrifice cards that could be used for something other than what you're using it for. Now, in addition to that, you're also going to generate soul, which is generally good for a couple reasons. One, you can always turn in 10 soul and exchange it to change from this little tiny character who hits people with a stick to this hellborn creature who blows people up with hellfire. So obviously having this is very advantageous, and by turning in 10 of those, you can change into your demon form and stay that way until the end of your next turn. Now, that said, that doesn't mean you want to do it every single time. Is this turn the one where you want to use up those 10? You might want to wait till the next one. Maybe there's going to be a better timing. You'll also see that if you leave it at 10 and you keep accumulating soul, it'll help you heal. That can be very, very, very useful. You might have some cards and attacks that cost soul to use. Are you going to use it for those individual attacks, including some that may help you get your corruption down? Because these are all things that lead to, and the whole idea with corruption is little by little it is going to make it so each of your actions becomes tainted, and every time you use a tainted action, one, you earn more corruption, but also if all three of your actions become tainted, you turn into this demon form, and that now this time you have no control over it. You lose control over it, and your peers are forced to fight against it. That is not a good thing to have happen and should be avoided at all costs. So, thematically, one, this makes the game tense and fun. And also, it's also a reminder that thematically, this game is about you inherently doing something dangerous for power. And there's a couple things about the game that I think work well. Now, the first is going to be very superficial, and that's that it doesn't use the D20 for attacking. I don't know why, but I just tend to really appreciate when D20s are not used for 2-hit rolls. I'm not saying I don't like games where they are used. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using them for D&D and Pathfinder. I'm just saying when I have a dungeon crawler board game, I tend to prefer dice that have iconography. And this game has plenty of iconography. It has symbols for hit. You need to get enough actual hit icons on it to make sure you actually land your attack. If you get 3 or more over that, you get to land a critical, and then based on your luck stat, you get to add extra damage. And also on top of that, you are also going to get different colored dice based on your equipment, and they are also going to have extra damage icons. They are going to have corruption because some dice give you more corruption, so be careful about what weapon you choose to fight with. It might be really powerful, but for instance, if it has the black die, you might do a lot of damage, but you also have a side that will literally give you 2 corruption just for swinging that sword. And on top of that, that makes for a lot of dynamic rolls. Now, it does, in the beginning of the game, leave very little room for dice mitigation. However, what I found is it wasn't quite as frustrating as I was expecting because you have 3 actions on a turn. You're given those 3 tokens, and if your attack doesn't land, you do have some other cards with which to work with, and there's usually something valid you could do. Even if you don't have cards that really help out your allies, which, to be honest, most of the time you do, there's a lot of good synergy if you look for it. You can also do things like go and interact with a chest, go and interact with some sort of scenery. A lot of the different fights you're going to be in are going to include different explorable and interactable objects. They're going to include some positioning you can do because you can spend each of your actions to move 3 spaces as well, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of things to work with, and I did not find it too frustrating. That said, it has to be mentioned that it is a little bit more deterministic than TANARES. And so if you were a big fan of the fact that TANARES could at times be a puzzle that you could predict what was going to happen based on picking the logical move, that is definitely present here, but you are going to have a larger likelihood of having a die roll that just screws up your entire system a little bit. Now, that happened in TANARES as well, and they would have a minimal amount of damage you would do. This game does not have that. Instead, it just has other opportunities for you to possibly do good and help your neighbors. I ended up kind of liking that a bit. I also like the way it was done in Dragori's other games. It's just something where your mileage may vary on this. And if you love the fact that TANARES was so deterministic, this could present as a little more frustrating. That said, there's also people who found TANARES to be a puzzle that was quite solvable, and that once you get the idea of how each character works, you can pretty much just wipe the floor with everyone. If that's the way you felt, this game might give you a little more unpredictability, so that's something to weigh based on your personal tastes. Oh, now that also leads us to another piece, which is that some of the randomness and some, I shouldn't say randomness, it's not horribly random, but a little bit less deterministic, and some of the things with the ongoing need to control your corruption means there is inherently a little bit more push your luck in this system. Now, I find that a lot of times I really don't like push your luck systems, except when I do, and when I do, I love them. Oathsworn is one of my favorite games ever. The entire way of drawing cards for combat or rolling dice is inherently push your luck, but the system was so ingenious that I didn't mind it. It didn't even feel like luck most of the time. That's kind of how this one feels to an extent for me. Are you going to let your corruption go up higher and do other things with your turns, or are you going to spend an action to try and lower your corruption and sacrifice some HP to do that? If you get to 10 soul, are you going to transform into that big monster now, or are you maybe going to wait till another turn when you can use it in a more opportune time? Or are you not going to transform at all, and every time you get more soul, you're going to heal yourself, which is also an option. There's a lot of choices with that in this game, and it ends up being very cool. Now, I talked a little bit also about and there's a million things I could still say, but the video's getting long. I don't want to go on for too long. But I talked a little bit... where was I at? That's the problem with rambling, is you forget things. Talked a little bit about how you're constantly getting new loot, constantly getting, ways to level up, constantly getting ways to be stronger. Now, every single one is very incremental. So you're never really blossoming. You're never blossoming or jumping from level 1 to level 20. You're jumping from level 1 to level 1.1 to level 1.2 to level 1.3. And it's happening often enough that you always have something new to try. And what this replaces is the city phase from TANARES, which is a mechanic that I enjoyed, but felt complicated about. I found that it was a lot more fun to do solo, ironically. Even though I think it was kind of designed for a group, I found that in a group it was a little more just tense and frustrating, and bickering ensued for that sort of thing. So I don't miss that. That said, it is one of the ways in which the game has sort of streamlined a little bit and made everything a little bit focused. There's not a million different mechanics in between everything. There's just how this works, and then we make permutations over it. That is something that could be very good for you if you found some of those more frustrating, or it could be really excellent. In my instance, I like the way many games, love to overcomplicate things. I enjoy complicated games quite a bit. I even enjoy games that overcomplicate things. I also enjoy how this game basically says we're not going to worry about big city phases where we're doing things that are apart from the general dungeon crawl. This game is really focused on the dungeon crawl. The only thing that happens outside of that dungeon crawl and outside of that leveling up and getting loot and choosing new cards to upgrade and choosing new ways and trying new demons to junction with, the only thing that separates from that is the simple journey phase before each dungeon. And that is basically your choose your own adventure component. That ends up working really well for me. Now, that said, this is a game where, depending on what you're expecting out of a dungeon crawler, it could be too complicated. And depending on what you're expected, it could be not complicated enough. For me right now, after having spent a good amount of time playing Kingdoms Forlorn and Aeon Trespass Odyssey, it's hitting a really, really nice sweet spot. And I'm okay with the fact that I'm not certain that this will be a game that if I ever choose to replay it, I'm pretty sure there will be no new content dungeon-wise, or very little dungeon-wise that I have not seen. But I love the idea of getting to the end of this game, really focusing on what it is. on the core content and then saying, you know what, I want to try it again with another hero and another demon. That sounds very cool to me. And I say this as someone who loves TANARES, but currently I'm 2/3 of the way through the campaign. I'm pretty certain I will finish it. But if I never do, like I said earlier, my hot take is, who really cares how replayable a game is if you never finish it the first time through? So, having said that, I hope my thoughts on Odalin helped you make a decision. Clearly, I'm enjoying this game, but there are lots of things that I understand may or may not be up your alley. Please share your thoughts if you've had a chance to try it. Other than that, have a great day. Subscribe, hit the like, give me a comment. Always happy to have you watching, and you have a great day.